and welcome back to the Azure Terraformer. With the recent release of the version 4.0 of the azurerm provider, I thought it might be a serendipitous time to talk about how to upgrade deprecated resources, because there's a couple of those in the v4 release. Before I get started today, I'd just like to thank one of my new members, Scrambler. Welcome to the Azure Terraformer. Really appreciate you supporting the channel. Make sure to pop on the Discord server and identify yourself. If you'd like to join Scrambler and support the Azure Terraformer and what I do here, please smash that join button and consider one of the membership options. It really helps out a lot. So today I have a little bit of a contrived example where I provisioned some resources using the version 2.99.0 version of the azurerm provider. Now this version of the provider is from over 3 years ago. But I'm sure there's nobody in my audience that would ever still be having resources running in production from this version of the provider, right? Well, just in case, we'll do this for the love of the game. How about that? So in version 4 of the azurerm provider, there are two resources in particular that I'm picking on that have been deprecated. There's the Azure App Service Plan, and then there's the Azure App Service. Now, both of these resource types have new resource types that are supported in version 4 of the provider. But if you have applications out there running on resources provisioned and managed with the old version of the provider, you're in for a bit of an upgrade. So let's go take a look at our code and see the problem that we got ourselves in through sheer, utter neglect. Let's hop into the code. So as you can see here, I have a pretty simple solution set up. I have a resource group. I have an Azure App Service Plan. That'll be important later. And then I have an Azure App Service. Now, this Azure App Service is actually dependent on the Azure App Service Plan. That's kind of how an Azure App Service works. You have a plan. The plan is used by one or more app services. And basically the plan is actually what you pay for. The plan is shared infrastructure across all these apps that run. It's kind of like, you can think of it as kind of like a lightweight Kubernetes cluster, which is a grotesque oversimplification, but it makes things very simple. And you can load a whole bunch of apps onto this cluster, essentially. But these resources are deprecated. And you can see here, I'm currently running on version 2.99 of the azurerm provider. And you can see that I've been a good steward and I have pinned myself to this version because, look, people get busy and I just didn't have time to, go through the upgrade over the last 3 years. So, stuff happens. But now's the time. Now's my time to shine. We're going to go from 2.99 to 4.0, baby. That's what we're going to go do. So how do we do that? What's the first step? Well, I'm off to a pretty good start. I pinned the version. This gives me time to think. Okay, I'm just going to sit here and think about what my next course of action is going to be. Now, to get to 4.0, I might need to take a baby step. So so a good approach with any infrastructure as code project, particularly something that I got running in production, I can't just YOLO and just change this to 4 and just hope everything works, right, on the next Terraform apply, because that might just cause me more headaches. Like, what if I need to push a patch or something like that, or a config change? And all my Terraform state's completely borked. So losing control over my infrastructure by borking my Terraform state file with kind of an impromptu YOLO upgrade, it's not a good idea. It's not a good plan. It's not going to work out well for you. Okay. So I would say change is best in small quantities, particularly with infrastructure as code. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at taking a baby step. And that is going from 2.x to 3.x, just for starters, just to get our feet wet, get ourselves a little bit comfortable. And there's a really good reason for that. So it all starts with these deprecated resources. So let's go look at that. So if I go over here and I go back to Wow, this might take a while of scrolling. Okay. If I go back to 2.99 of the provider, yeah, there we go, 3 years ago. And I look under here called App Service Plan. So there it is, azurerm App Service Plan. That's my guy. And you can see there it is. It looks very suspiciously like the code in my repo here. But basically, this is the resource. Now, if I go and I look at this, let's look at a 3.x version. Now, typically, when moving from provider version to provider version, if our ultimate goal, I mean, we could go to 3.0, right? But if our ultimate goal is to get to 4.0, right? There's a whole lot of versions from 3.0.0 to 3.116.0. So, we could give this a shot and go from 2.99 to 3.116 and then try to get to 4.0. Of course, we should be doing this in a non-production workspace, okay? So, again, we're not going to be, even this hypothetical scenario where we actually have something running in production, we're not just going to go YOLO this upgrade. We're gonna upgrade it once in a newly provisioned environment, make sure everything goes smooth, and write everything down, and then follow that procedure in our production environment. So, for starters, we can try with 3.116. If we run into problems, maybe there are breaking changes somewhere within the 3.x version, right? That could be a thing. But for starters, let's just try it out with 3.116. This would be the best case scenario. If we can get it to 3.116 is a bridge version, which means this is a well-tested path of upgrade from 3.x to 4.x, which ultimately we want to get to 4.x. So, okay, we've settled on this. So we're looking at 3.116, and so we already have a problem. This resource has been deprecated. That's a problem. I mean, we kind of had an idea getting into this. I gave a little bit of a spoiler at the beginning of this episode. So, we kind of saw this coming. And we'll see here in a second why we probably saw this coming. But maybe there's other projects that, we've been working on newer versions, and maybe we've used App Service Plan as well. So we might be aware of this. And generally speaking, but now, this awareness has to turn into actual tangible action. So what do we do? So this resource has been deprecated. It says that we should be using this other resource. So I probably need to go to look at that. Put that in the parking lot. Okay, we're going to keep that for later. And so I have this deprecated resource, and I need to move over to this other resource here, okay? The good news is this resource is currently supported in 3.116, so I'm okay. So another resource that is going to be deprecated is this Azure App Service. So if I go look at that, that's going to be up here at the top. Let me open a new tab with that guy. Yeah. And again, this one is also deprecated. And it says, please use these. Okay. And now this is kind of an interesting one, because instead of giving me one resource type, now it gives me two resource types. And I got to go figure out which one to use, right? We'll get into that later. But again, we'll put this in the parking lot. We don't need to solve this problem just yet, because the first step of our upgrade path is getting from 2.99 to 3.116. So we're going to set that as our objective. So both of these resource types are currently supported in 3.116. So I feel pretty good. Like I can leave my code as is, just upgrade to 3.116 and then see what happens. So you can see I provisioned this 3 years ago. And so I have all this stuff out in the portal. And here's the resource group with all the things. So I have my Azure App Service Plan and I have my app service. And they're both in West US 2. So let's just pretend, right, these things are running in production, because even when we go to this in our test, like workspace, we are going to kind of try and be pretending like this is production. So we want to make sure that production is impacted before we go execute this against production, right? So we're going to pretend like this is production, but it isn't really production. Of course, this is a demo video, but when you go do this and test your upgrade path, you're not going to be doing this in production either, right? Okay. So here we go. All I need to do is go here and set my version to 3.116, right? That should be good. Of course, let's go to the pessimistic operator and let's run Terraform init, because Terraform init is that command that you run when you want to reload the providers and reload the modules, right? So this should work, right? No. Actually, when you want to upgrade a provider, you have to tell it, hey, we want to upgrade a provider. This is a guard to basically help you avoid the foot gun of accidentally like borking your Terraform state file. Because this will make some changes. So it's basically saying, are you sure you want to do that? And if you are sure you want to do that, then you need to run the -upgrade option with the Terraform init to basically say, yes, I do. So it has detected that there has been a version change in the required providers block, and it's just making sure that this is what we intend to do. So let's just add that. Upgrade. And there we go. We don't have any problems. We've successfully upgraded. Now here's the test. Can I just run this on 3.116? Like maybe I decide 4.0's like a little bit, it's a bridge too far. Am I happy staying on 3.116? Well, let's run Terraform apply and just see what happens. Like, are we able to continue to manage these deprecated resources on 3.116? And there you go. You can see that the Terraform apply came back with no changes. However, it came back with a warning telling us about these deprecated resources. Spoiler alert, right? So this is probably what you're going to be seeing if you're working on old versions of your provider. The resource gets deprecated. You're going to get these little nag messages to remind you before you go and upgrade to the next major release, which is 4.0, which that's what we want to do. So that's nice. Okay. So if we want to go upgrade to 4.0, we have to get rid of these deprecated resources. So I'm done changing the version of the provider for just now. The next problem that I have to do is I have to get rid of these deprecated resources before I try and flip the bit and upgrade to 4.0, right? So how do I do that? Well, in Terraform, there are methods for refactoring and moving resources around. There's a declarative way of doing it using a moved block. And then there is an imperative way of doing it using the Terraform state move command, or MV. So shouldn't that work? I mean, that's what we're doing here, right? We don't want to delete this resource. We want to move it from an old home to a new home. That should work, right? Let's give that a shot. So the way that the move block works is you need to have a moved block declared. And basically you're going to have a from and a symbol, TBD, and then a to, and that's a TBD as well. Well, the from, we know. This is our old one. And then we go main, and that's our reference to the old app service, azurerm app service plan, right? Now, if we want to move to, that means that we have to move it to a different reference, a different resource type in this case, with a different object name. So we probably need to go figure out how to provision that. So if we go look at our new Azure App Service Plan, here it is. Remember, we were moving from this one and we're moving to the new one. This is supported in version 4, right? So if I copy this and I move this in here, I'm basically going to declare a new one, right? And this is going to be the same thing. Now, I want it to have the same name because if I change the name, I know that my app service plan is going to get recreated. So the name has to be the same. I suppose the object reference can stay the same because this is the only azurerm service plan object, like resource that I've declared. Of course, it needs to stay in the same resource group. Now, the OS type and the SKU. Well, this is where the two resource types don't match. So how do I figure out what the value should be? Well, in this case, the OS type, well, I have to go back and look at my old resource to kind of figure that out. So if I go back here and I scroll down and, well, this is the new version. And so I got OS type, Windows, Linux, Windows container, okay? Let's go, this is the new type. And I got Windows, Linux, and Windows container for its OS type. So let's go look on the old resource type and see if we can find something that might match that. And I mean, pretty quickly, it becomes fairly clear what attribute that should be. It's called kind, and it has several different options: Windows, Linux, Elastic, Xenon, Function App, and it says it defaults to Windows. So if you didn't specify the kind on your azurerm app _ service plan, then it's going to default to Windows. That means I have a Windows version of this. So I need to change this value to Windows. Now, the SKU name is a little bit different. And if I go look at the SKU name again, let's see here. Mine's set to S1. I see S1 as a value there. So let's go back. And, well, I have a size of S1, but I have a tier of standard. In this case, it appears that the powers that be that kind of rewrote this new resource simplified this, and instead of having a nested block for the SKU with multiple attributes and all that, they were just like, well, I mean, S1 kind of does the same thing, right? So let's just do that. So now I need to update my to reference to main. And let's just see what happens. Now I'm a little bit nervous about this, so let's run plan, not apply, and just see what happens. Oh ho! So we have a little bit of a problem. So azurerm does not support move operations across resource types and providers. So in this case, because I'm trying to move one resource, of type app _ service plan, to azurerm service _ plan, those are two different resource types. It doesn't matter that they're for the same Azure service. They're different resource types to the azurerm Terraform provider. So it won't do that. That is kind of interesting. It says that this provider doesn't support that. So I'm wondering if there are other Azure providers that, I'm wondering if there are other Terraform providers that do support this, like cross-type movement. That would be pretty cool. But clearly this is not going to work. Now, instead of using these, so let's get rid of this imperative. Let's get rid of this declarative approach here. And let's try the move block. So I can do Terraform state, and with Terraform state, I have this move operation. And with Terraform state move, basically I say I can provide options, but I need to provide a source and a destination. So it's essentially the same thing as the declarative, except I'm executing a command. So the source comes first, which I suppose that would be the from, paste, and then the destination comes second. So we're just going to try it one extra time. And you can see here that even using the imperative approach, basically the state command line operation, we can't do this because the resource types don't match. So I think this means that our dream of just moving, from one resource to another resource is just not going to work at all. I purposely went down this path because somebody who's not familiar with these limitations might think, oh, well, I have the move block and I have the move command, so this is going to work. It doesn't. Spoiler alert. Sorry. So what options do we have? Well, so let me just delete all this, and maybe I'll just save this block here for later. We'll just save the app service plan that I spent all that time creating to be used at some future point in time, maybe. So now what are our options? Well, we do have another refactoring block called the removed block. And we also have another refactoring block called the import block. So if we wanted to, we could remove the resource of the deprecated type, in this case azurerm app_service_plan, and then we could import the existing resource that, it's still in Azure, but we would import it, and we would import it into the new type because both types support this Azure service. It's just one doesn't live on past 3.x. So yeah, that's what we kind of have to do. Now, there's a tricky bit about this because, first of all, there's some dependencies between our app service plan and our app service, and we have to migrate both of them, right? So unfortunately, what it looks like is we might have to remove the app service itself before we can remove the plan. And so we kind of have to walk from the lowest level of dependent resource, I guess the tips of the tree. If you think about that, there's the trunk of the tree and then branches and then little smaller branches and smaller branches off of that. You have to go all the way to the furthest leaf, essentially, of that dependency graph. And in this case, it's rather simple, it's just the Azure App Service, and it references the plan. So we have to remove the app service, and then we have to remove the plan, and then we have to work our way back up. So we have to start at the bottom, which is bring back the plan, and then bring back the app, that's dependent on the plan. So it's kind of almost like a V shape, you remove all the way down to the bottom, and then you import all the way back to the top. So that's, I think, what we got to do. So we know we need 2 import blocks. So we might want to capture what the resource ID is for each of these resources before we do that. So I'm going to drop into Terraform console, and I'm just going to grab the resource ID of my app service plan and of my app so that I can make note of it when I want to write my import blocks. It'll make a lot of sense later. So once I execute Terraform console, basically I'm in this interactive mode where I can ask the current Terraform workspace to give me values out of the Terraform state. This is very convenient in lieu of just outputting these things and rerunning apply and getting the output value, because sometimes you don't know what you want to output. But in this case, It's pretty straightforward. I need my app service plan ID. Now, this is going to give me the whole blob of all the stuff that's about that app service plan. But if I do that again and I just say, hey, give me the ID, then it just gives me the ID. And I can go grab this and we'll just put this right here, right? For later, ... Okay? And now we're going to do the same thing for the app service. So I'm just going to grab this. I'm going to say paste .main. And then grab the ID. And this is the app service. So I'm going to save that for later as well. I'll just say app plan. So I got my app service plan and I got my app service app. Okay. All right. So now let the removals begin. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to remove the app service plan. So I'm going to create a new, just like with the move block, I'm going to create a remove block. And just like the move block, I'm referencing the resource type and the particular resource that I want. I just have it called main because this is the main squeeze for my app service. And I set the life cycle setting to destroy equals false. So basically I'm saying, I want to remove this from state, but I don't want you to destroy the resource, right? So now let's go run this. I think I'm still in console. Now it's giving me an error message and it's saying, the statement declares that this app service was removed, but the code still exists. So in this case, this is the code. Now, if I were to not have that remove block, and I were to delete this code, then we all know that this app service would get destroyed. But now commenting out this code, because this remove block is here, is not going to destroy my app service anymore. And you can see this was a bit of a guard telling me, hey, you told me that you wanted to remove this thing, but its code is still there. So it's not removed. This does not compute, right? So now that it's commented out, it's removed. Now the reason why I left it commented out is because I'm going to have to bring it back. So I need to know how it was configured, right? So this will be good scaffolding for how to bring it back. All right, so let's try that apply again. And let's look at what it's going to say. So it says my azurerm app service will no longer be managed by Terraform, but will not be destroyed. That's a very interesting thing, okay? And so I think we want to do that. So let's go do that. Okay, now if we rerun apply, this should be pretty clean. Yes. Now that this thing has been removed, right? This app service app has been removed, this remove block is meaningless. Like I don't need this anymore. So what would typically happen is I would go back after this operation has been done and I would remove the remove block. Why? Cleanliness. Pretty much. That's pretty much it. So now I remove the remove block and nothing. No difference, right? Zero changes. Because that remove block has lived out its purpose in life. All of these refactoring blocks, moved, removed, import, are all essentially transient. They fulfill their purpose for a brief moment in time, and then once that time has passed, it's over. We don't need them anymore. So it's definitely good practice to clean up your code after you make the changes to your environment. Now, this is very different if you are a module author. Like you may need to leave those in there for backward compatibility and an upgrade path for people that are on older versions of your module. So just a heads up there, but I'm talking root module development here right now. So, okay, so I've removed that. Now I'm going to remove my app service plan. So again, I'm going to comment out the code. I learned my lesson. And now I'm going to add a remove block. And I'm just going to check the plan. And it says my app service plan will no longer be managed by Terraform, but it will not be destroyed. And that's what I want. So we're going to say yes to that. Perfect. Now my Terraform is pretty clean. Like, I don't have a lot of stuff in here. Let me just get rid of this remove block because I'm a bit OCD. So I run apply again. I'm still provisioning some things. I mean, at this point, I have a random string and I have a resource group. That's it. But there might have been other things in my environment. So now what I have to do is I have to bring them back. And again, I worked from the furthest most leaf on down to the trunk of the tree, which is that app service plan. Now I got to work from the trunk of the tree out or up, however you see things. So that means I have to bring the plan back. So for starters, I believe I commented out like my service plan. Yeah, this was my service plan code. Now, if I uncomment this out, this should be pretty good. Like, the name has to be the same, just like when I attempted this with the move block. It's got to be in the same resource group, and it's got to have, certain immutable characteristics set, right? Now, what I'm missing here, I'm missing how to communicate to Terraform that this thing already exists, right? Because if I run it right now, Terraform is going to be like, I can't create an app service plan like that, or I need to go create a new one. Can I go do that, right? So I might run into validation or name conflicts or something like that. So I need to declare an import block. So to declare an import block, it's very similar to the moved and the remove block. You just say import, and you say to, and then my resource, which should be this, and then I give it the ID. Now this is where that magic string comes into play. So previously it was my plan. This is my plan, and this is the Azure resource ID of my plan. So I'm gonna pop that in here. All right, and now I'm just gonna see what happens. And you can see in my plan it has one to import, not to add. I'm not adding anything. This thing already exists. We can go look at it out in the Azure portal. It's still there. Boom. If you don't believe me, let me smash refresh. They're both still there. I haven't deleted anything from Azure. I've only deleted things from state. So now what I'm going to go do is I'm going to say, okay, yeah, I want to go do that. Let's bring this thing back under management. So I'm going to run apply. And I'm going to hit yes. And boom, now this thing is back under management. If I hit apply, it's going to give me 0 changes. Yeah. Now, again, my import block has served its purpose, and I can just delete this now. I don't have any problems anymore. This thing's already imported. I don't need that import block anymore. It's in state. The connective tissue is there. So again, 0 changes because my app service plan is under management now. Wonderful thing. So now the first step up the stack is complete. Now the next step is my app service. So this thing, if you recall, I had 2 types that I could, let me get rid of the plan. I'm done with the plan. So I had 2 types that I could pick. Now, we already established that I was running on the Windows version of the app service plan. So guess what? I'm probably going to need the Windows version of the web app. So let's open this guy up and let's see what we got here. So I've got azurerm, Windows web app. Let me grab that. And I'm going to systematically replace my old app service with this. So I want the name to be the same. It's got to be in the same resource group. To the best of my ability, I need to have it match on all of those immutable characteristics, right? And here's where I reference to that service plan. Again, you can see why I had to do the service plan first, because if I don't even have a reference to the service plan, it's a bit of a non-starter. Like I'm not going to be able to bring this thing back. So kind of important that that service plan is already there. Now site config, this is going to be where it gets a little wonky, right? And I've got all these settings here. I don't really know what's going on. I've got this app settings. You know, I could do my best, you know, and just see. So there's an app settings block. Okay, so that's still the same. It's a map of key value pairs. So I might be able to just bring that back. Let's just delete, you know, bring it back. And site config looks a little nasty. Let's check connection string. Connection string, one or more connection string blocks. Okay. So the connection string might be fine. Like we might not have any issues with the connection string. However, the site config looks, I mean, it looks a little bit hairy. Let's just run apply after we set up our import block though. Okay. So I need to set an import block. I say import to ID. Now I need to go get that ID from console. There you go. Now I did run apply, but I'm going to wait and look at the plan. I am a bit of a cowboy, but I'm not that much of a cowboy. Okay. So again, I have one to import, one to change. So if I go look at this, right? What am I changing? Well, it looks like I'm importing my web app, but there's some changes on it, hence the yellow tilde. Now it looks like app settings, no change. That copy pasted over well. There's a bunch of things here that are really not interesting. And yes, of course, I'm going to get to site config. Now, it looks like site config is looking to change some values. So it's important that I understand what's happening in this picture, right? So if I were to agree to this plan, then what I'm going to be agreeing to is to be changing always on from false to true, which means that in my original configuration, always on was set to false. So why would I want it to be set to true? I don't. So that's the first thing I need to do. I need to go into my site config and I need to set always on to false. So what probably happened, because if you don't see always on in my app, you don't see always on in my site config. What probably happened is the default in the version 2 of the resource, or the old deprecated resource, defaulted to false, and the new resource defaults it to true. So in order to not make any changes to my resource, I need to meet that requirement. So if I run, let's just stick to plan so I don't accidentally bork myself. So if I run plan again, I didn't import it. Okay, I just looked at like the import attempt and what the import wanted to do. And the import wants to change some things. So I'm trying to systematically remove those changes so that there's nothing changing when I do this apply. Because in production, I don't want to have even the slightest chance that I'm changing something about this app service app, because it might impact my application. Now, I might, you know, maybe some of these settings, like I get to a point where I'm fine, you know. Actually, FTPS state, it looks like the default was FTPS only, and now the default is disabled, which is a much better security posture anyway. But for the sake of argument, I want to stick to FTPS only, because I just want everything to be, you know, as it was originally. So if I go down this, Use 32-bit worker. Was set to false. Now it's trying to be set to true. Not sure why. And then, yeah, there we go. Okay, so I've got one to import, one to change. I'm still changing. So as you can see here, I've gotten rid of all the changes, but now there's some add changes, right? So I'm adding this attribute set to allow. I'm adding this attribute to allow as well. And then I'm removing this virtual application. Now this looks like a really bad idea because this might be actually where my application is hosted. So this looks kind of scary. These other ones might be okay. So I don't like this one. So the fact that I'm removing this and removing these values means that these values were set by my old config, even though it's not in my code. So in order to maintain equivalence, I think my only course of action is to reproduce this. And actually, I think all of this is in the site config. I apologize. Yeah. Okay. So if I can get to a place where I'm not deleting or changing existing things, I think I'm probably going to be okay. And I'll be in a place where it'll be good enough that I can apply this to my test environment and go hit my application to see how my app's running and like test my app to make sure my app is hunky-dory. And if that's the case, I'd probably be good to rock and roll in production. So that looks pretty good. I brought all that stuff back. The only thing I'm adding is this IP restriction default action allow, which I think that's just, that's very permissive, which I probably want to go ratchet that down and remove that at some point, but it should not impact my workload in production. So I'm going to make a judgment call. I'm going to go apply this, and we're going to be off to the races. And there you have it. So now that's all done and dusted. I can go delete this import block. I can go delete all this unnecessary comments and all these old resources and get back to some a pretty clean repo that has just the code that I want with no dead code, making future authors wonder what is going on. And then I can run apply again, and I should see 0 changes. Voila. Now, what do we have left to do? I'm currently on 3.116, which is a bridge upgrade version to 4.0. So if I change this to 4.0 and I run Terraform init upgrade, and there's already a patch, right? Now I'm upgraded to 4.0, and if I run Terraform apply, oh no. I have to set my subscription ID. This is a new feature of 4.0, so don't panic. I have to go export arm. Actually, I need to go az account show, and this is my subscription ID. Export arm subscription ID equals blah. And now, and now run apply. No changes. And there you have it. we have successfully upgraded this 2.99 version running on deprecated resources using Azure App Service Plan and Azure App Service to the 4.0 version of the azurerm provider. Now, I took you down a few pathways that were a bit unnatural, but I did that to prove a point, right? To help you be aware that these refactoring blocks are not really intended for these purposes, right? And the state management blocks are not really intended for these purposes. So in the episode today, we went through a version upgrade from 2.99 to 3.116 to 4.0 ultimately. We looked at the moved block and saw that the move block doesn't work with different resource types, and it's really intended for moving resources between modules, so module refactoring. And then we saw how to use the remove block to remove things out of state, but we saw that we had to do that in a certain order based on the dependencies of the resources. And then we saw how we could bring them all back using the import block, but again, we had to follow the reverse order to bring them back. And then once we're done, we were able to upgrade to 4.0. So I know this might seem like a bit of a chore, but once you get the hang of it and you understand the infrastructure that you're provisioning, i.e. you understand the dependency graph of the resources, it isn't that hard, actually. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. It really helps out a lot. And let me know how the azurerm 4.0 upgrade is going for you. Or pop on the Discord server for Azure Terraformer and let us all know. There's a lot of good folks on there just like me that are ready to help. Anyways, that's it from me. This is the Azure Terraformer, signing off.